Today we're going to make two potato side dishes. We're going to make mashed potatoes with Yukon Golds, and we're going to make a potato dauphinoise gratin with Idaho russets. When I was in culinary school, one of my instructors said what might have been the closest thing to a universal truth I had ever heard. He said, mashed potatoes are a vehicle to get butter and salt into your mouth. This axiom can be broken down into simpler terms. Use a bland carbohydrate base to deliver fat and flavor. And this is what I'm going to show you today. Two simple, classic presentations of potatoes. Let's start with mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes are deceptively difficult to make. The potato cooking process is relatively straightforward, but the mashing process is what really throws things for a loop. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's get the potatoes cooked. Before we get started, we need to get the other ingredients up to room temperature. Cut a stick of butter and a half a carton of cream cheese into chunks. These are both 4 ounces by weight. Also set aside a half a cup of heavy cream. Step 1, prep and cook the potatoes. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on how to boil potatoes. It's a pretty straightforward procedure, but here's a couple of tips to maybe make it easier for you. 1, use a bowl to catch the peels instead of making a mess all over the countertop or throwing your back out doing it over a garbage can. 2, salt the water. If you properly season the water, you won't have to add any salt later. Good ballpark is something like a heaping tablespoon per pound of potatoes. 3, don't use waxy red potatoes for this. Use russet or Yukon Gold. I like the golds because they give the dish a buttery look without extra butter. 4, the peeler is pulled towards you. You have more control, and with a little practice, this is going to get a lot faster than just flailing at the potato with the peeler. 5, cut the potatoes into consistent sized chunks. You won't be super accurate because you're cutting a cylinder into cubes, but do the best you can. 6, the best way to test for doneness is smashing the potato on a plate. I find this more accurate than just poking it with a knife. Okay, now that the potatoes are cooked, step 2, mash the potatoes. Let's talk method here. Bad mashed potatoes are normally a product of bad mashing technique. The problem is that people use some electronic device to save time, and it almost always ruins the dish. When a potato is mashed, it releases some starch, and the perfect amount of starch is going to make a wonderfully creamy plate of mashed potatoes. Over mashing in a food processor or a mixer, you're going to get wallpaper paste. The more starch that gets released, the more gluey the potatoes. Once too much starch is released, there's no going back. That's why you want to avoid machines like that. For me, I like a ricer. A food mill is a great device here if you have one. You can also use a standard whole colander. Just drain the potatoes and then put the colander over your bowl and press the potatoes through the holes with a spatula. I know this sounds like a lot of work, but it's worth it. Step 5, fold the ingredients. Okay, we are folding the potatoes. We are not mixing them. We want to be gentle. Pull the spatula up the side, spin the spatula in the air, drop the potatoes back in the bowl. Think of it like a little skateboarder on a quarter pipe. Add about half your cream once you fold it several times. And you don't want to use all the cream at once here because it'll become too moist. Fold until there are no streaks of cream cheese or butter in the potatoes and they're light and fluffy. Add the cream to get that final texture. Okay, so the next recipe is for potato dauphinoise. Step 1, prep the dish. I'm using russets for this recipe because you want a starchy potato. I grated all the cheese, which was about 8 ounces of Gruyere. I also got some butter to room temperature because we're going to be spreading that butter in a pan. I also got the cream ready. I use about 16 ounces or a half a liter of cream in a bowl. I put in the tiniest amount here, 5 scrapes on a microplane of fresh nutmeg. This is about a dash worth. Nutmeg brings out the earthiness in the potatoes, but you don't want it to taste like a pumpkin spice latte, so don't overdo this. You also want to season the cream here. You want to add enough salt to the cream so when you taste it, it doesn't taste seasoned, it tastes salty. This is going to be the prime seasoning for the dish, and you're going to be adding pounds of starchy bland potatoes to it. So it should taste salty. I also add a dash of white pepper here. You can add black if you don't mind the color in the final dish, but I'm just using white. Step 2, peel and cut the potatoes. Peel all the potatoes. I used a lot of potatoes and made a large gratin. You can cut this in half easily. Once they're peeled, I set my mandolin to 1/8 inch and I place it on top of a bowl with cream. I cut the potatoes directly into the cream and toss it on occasion to coat them. I am not using a guard here. You should know that a mandolin is a very sharp device and it can hurt you. Cooking is dangerous. Make adult decisions. Unless you're not an adult, then use a guard. I'm using a mandolin here. You could feasibly do this with a knife. You just have to be pretty accurate in the size of the potatoes as you're cutting them, but a mandolin is almost certainly preferred. Step 3, arrange the dish. Coat all the potatoes in the cream, and then set aside for a few minutes. Take the pan you're going to be using and smear it with lots of butter. You want a nice thick coating on it. So you can add 2 cloves of chopped garlic to this dish, but I personally think it overpowers the subtle earthiness of the dish. I know there's a trend now to add not just garlic, but a whole lot of garlic to dishes, and I'm all for making things your own, but adding a bunch of garlic to stuff and making it taste like garlic is just as boring as adding nothing. And if you do decide to add the 200 to 400 cloves of chopped garlic to this dish, skip the nutmeg. You're not going to taste it. Also, don't buy quality Gruyere. You're not going to be able to tell the difference between that and some bagged Colby Jack and Parmesan. I do like the slight taste of garlic in this dish, again, to bring out the earthiness of the potatoes. So what I do is I peel and smash 1 clove of garlic. I smash it just to get the juices flowing, and then I smear that clove of garlic into the buttered pan. I don't leave any chunks in there. I just want to smear that garlic juice all over that butter. Trust me, this is a great subtle flavor, and it will accent all the ingredients in the dish without overpowering them. Now, arrange the potatoes in a layer and sprinkle on some of the cheese. Not a lot, just a little. You can be super careful and line up the potatoes exactly, or you can just place a layer and smash them down a bit and then add more cheese. The final dish is going to settle quite a bit, so you don't have to be too careful. I take a kind of in-between approach. I place a handful at a time, and then I even them out a bit by arranging them. Just keep alternating layer of potatoes and cheese until the end. Once you're out of potatoes, pour the leftover cream into the dish. Now, you don't want it swimming, but you want it to come up onto the side so you could see the cream underneath. Then you're going to wind up adding the last layer of cheese. This is essentially all the cheese you have left on top of the potatoes. Step 4, bake the dish. I put a bit of aluminum foil on top of the pan so it doesn't get too much color throughout. I put it in a 350-degree preheated oven for about 45 minutes. Then I take off the foil and I cook it for an additional 15 minutes to 30 minutes. Now to test this, I poke with a sharp knife. It should offer no resistance. If it doesn't have the color you want, you can put it under the broiler for a minute or 2. Set it on the counter and wait for about 15 to 20 minutes before you cut into it. So it's going to continue to cook and firm up a bit. The liquid's going to go into the potatoes instead of just spilling out over the plate when you cut it and serve it too soon. So that is 2 potato side dishes. I hope you enjoyed it. These are guaranteed to wow family and friends. And I want to thank you for watching today. And if you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments below.